Good morning, everybody. I'm Carolyn from Midwest Manufacturers Association, and I am happy to be here and introduce our speakers for today. We have Julie Oehme. She's a VP of Sales and Marketing at Aperture Labs, and Stephen Peckous from he's senior sales at engineer at Inriver, and they're going to be talking to you today about marketing the aftermarket, stop profit, leak after the sale. And we do invite you, if you have questions or comments, to please turn on your microphone and ask questions as we're going along. And that being said, I'll go ahead and turn it over to you guys.
Thank you very much, Carolyn. Yeah, as Carolyn said, chat chat your questions. Feel free to interrupt. Happy to have a dialogue as we're going here today. And we are speaking with you today about the aftermarket, really how to maximize revenue around aftermarket, how to stop profit from leaking to your competitors. So, a little bit of who we are, a quick intro, and why we care about this topic. So I am Julie Oehme. I lead sales and marketing at Aperture Labs. At Aperture Labs, we work with manufacturers and distributors to modernize their digital ecosystems, particularly around data, product data and e-commerce, customer experience, things like that. I've been in this space for over 20 years now, so I've seen a lot, and so has Stephen, joined here by Stephen Peckous from Inriver. I'll let him introduce himself.
Yeah, thanks, Julie. My name is Stephen Peckous. I'm a sales engineer with Inriver. Inriver is a software company that makes PIM. It's a platform or product information management system. But for about 15 or so years, I've been in the digital space, helping companies understand maybe technology needs or things that shift digitally. And just prior to joining Inriver, I spent the last 7 years at an industrial manufacturer and was part of that decision process of what do we do with data? Where does it go? What systems do we use to modernize? And so I've seen from many different angles the ways that companies approach and some of the struggles and pains that we have together in the space of industrial manufacturing. So excited to talk to you today more about that.
Yeah. So between the two of us, we've seen a lot of what works. We've seen a lot of what is broken across the industry. And we've certainly see where revenue gets left on the table. All right, so let's get into it. For most manufacturers, the sale doesn't end when equipment ships. The initial sale often starts a long tail of parts, consumables, services, and these items can quickly outpace the margins seen on the whole good. The initial sale really triggers what has the potential to be an extremely profitable customer relationship. I mean, even in times of economic uncertainty or economic downturn, aftermarket demand doesn't disappear. Equipment still needs to run, parts still wear out, maintenance still happens. And while this is all true, the aftermarket can often become an afterthought for manufacturers. It's something that lives in customer support, or it's something that manufacturers just trust that their distributors will guide customers through. Treating aftermarket as a core product, as a strategic lever for growth, allows manufacturers to not only deepen customer relationships and customer loyalty, increase customer lifetime value, but it also allows manufacturers to retain revenue that would otherwise be lost to a competitor. Because when one of your customers needs a replacement part, they're going to buy it. It just might not be from you. So let's talk about the reality of today's buyer. And, I talked a little bit about this when I spoke to this group in December, and it remains true. Today's customers are informed, they're self-directed, they're often impatient, and customers expect to identify the part or product they need quickly, right? They expect to understand compatibility without any guesswork. They expect installation guides to be easily accessible. They expect to complete a transaction without ever needing to engage with customer support in any way. No one wants to have to pick up the phone. No one wants to have to chat, chat with a human, or definitely not have to chat with a bot that doesn't even understand what they're saying. They just want it to be easy. And when those expectations aren't met, they're not going to wait, right? They're going to search marketplaces for the part that they need. They're going to call distributors for help. They're going to buy from third parties. And in many cases, the manufacturer never even knows that the revenue was theirs to lose. And in the aftermarket, more often than not, the ease of purchase trumps brand loyalty. The challenge that we see so often is that most organizations, they just don't have the operational processes in place to easily manage all of the product data required to drive a strong aftermarket program. They just weren't set up that way. So the data is spread across the organization, it's spread across different teams, and no one really knows who owns it or how to make it work. So it's a struggle. And there's impact. There's serious impact to the customer and also to the manufacturer. So for the customer, when aftermarket experiences break down, customers feel it immediately, right? They struggle to find the right part. The wrong parts get ordered. Returns increase. Installations are delayed. Warranty claims are made. They're frustrated and they lose confidence. And once a customer loses confidence and stops trusting your digital experience, they stop relying on you as the source of truth. And that's where the risk starts to creep in. Because if they can't trust the information they see from you as the manufacturer, who are they going to buy that part from now? Oh, all right. You as the manufacturer, let's flip that over now. For manufacturers, where there's friction around aftermarket, you're going to see support costs increase. You're going to see return rates go up. The dealer experiences are going to be inconsistent. Revenue is lost. And maybe the most damaging is the opportunity to build a direct, ongoing relationship with your customer is lost. And over time, these inefficiencies compound. So you might find that your support teams have become the de facto fitment engine, or that your product experts are spending time answering questions that should be self-service for the customer. And the revenue that should be captured online is lost to competitors. And those competitors are offering a clearer, easier path to purchase. So ultimately, the aftermarket is where loyalty is earned or loyalty is lost. So let's talk a little bit about why the aftermarket matters so much. So I'm going to turn it over to Stephen to cover this.
Yeah, Julie, that's the great tee up to all of this. And the aftermarket doesn't just matter, nor should it be any bit of an afterthought. It should really even be a forethought. You're creating something that you hope somebody loves, uses, enjoys, maybe beats up, but in a very real way, you're manufacturing something that is going to live its life in some aspect and form. And you're hoping that that customer enjoys it, whether they fix it or they come to use it. And then all of a sudden, when things happen, inevitably as they do, they've got to replace something. They've got to do something with it. And then all of a sudden, the question, as we alluded to before, is, well, those parts, if they're not buying it from you, they're buying somewhere. But as a manufacturer, you've got all of these different pillars. If you look at this, like margin density, that is man, have you guys ever looked at internally and thought about, well, what does this look like? Where do we make the money? What does that look like? What kind of complexities do we have? I'll give you some maybe high level statistics and even just a couple thought points. Finished goods, it's great to sell that. Everybody needs to. But is that where all the money is made? There's probably very slim margins on something that you actually manufacture and sell to the general public or to a B2B space or to another dealer. But then what about the proprietary parts or the things that you have designed? You probably have really high margin on that. But then there might be some competitive things like a nut or a bolt or a light bulb. Maybe that's competitive and the margin doesn't matter there. Or maybe it's not as strong as some other things. But the aftermarket parts and all of that goes into that customer loyalty, their experience, their engagement. There's a lot of different money that's made there, and it's extremely important to sustain that and also elevate that. But then also this plays into this thought of resilience, right? And what did we just go through for the last 5 or 6 years? There's a global pandemic. And when I was working for a manufacturer, what we saw was equipment that was really strong and was out there. All of a sudden, folks who were using it didn't want to purchase new. And there's a couple of reasons, right? What about supply chain? We couldn't get parts to make things for a long time. And that forced naturally users of equipment to prolong the life of it. They said a couple of things. Number one, well, I can't get new equipment, so I need to sustain what's already out there. And number two, the new equipment's more expensive than I was prepared for. So it's in my best interest to make the economic life of what I have last longer. So replacements and servicing that equipment became even stronger. And so in moments like this created pivotal moments for securing a customer for life. And after all, that's what we want. When we sell a finished good, do we want to just sell it and say, see you later? No, nobody wants that. We want to secure a customer for life, so much so that they're actually excited to do business and they look forward knowing that the manufacturer has their back, has support through and through. And hopefully every interaction through every tangible moment of truth, from sell to service to maintaining, creates this continuous cycle where you're creating that customer for life, and that customer behavior is continuing to fuel more and more. So then it takes us to this next kind of interesting aspect. And maybe we ponder for a moment and think about this. Have you maybe mapped out from different personas, the customer journey? Can they find the right part? And maybe they can, but what are the ways that they do that? I've seen many customers who have business systems and ERPs that have very flat taxonomies. In other words, they have really ambiguous ways of attributing their products and parts. There's not a clear path to, does this fit? Or may it fit? Or might it fit? There's a lot of ambiguity there. What about the legacy and tribal fitment knowledge? Who owns most of the product knowledge in your company? Probably the people. And rightfully so, there should be some subject matter experts, but do you even have systems that help, really support that and feed into that? And then do you have systems that also own some of that knowledge and data? Because as people retire, unfortunately, a lot of that tribal knowledge disappears. What about over time superseded SKUs? Where I was before was a manufacturer who had been in the space for a little over 100 years, very rich history of creating and thinking through products, making iterations upon things and making them better. And I can't tell you how many times I had a customer reach out, or I was working with a dealer who would say, can you help me find this? I think this is the series code to this piece of equipment, and here's the serial number. And we start to dig through documents. And I even remember having to pull microfilm, or what we call microfiche, and look at things. And then all of a sudden you're back to this 2-dimensional old CAD drawing, literally done on pen and paper. How many times had that part either been replaced or changed or modified over the last, it was close to 60 years? That equipment was still in use, but somebody's looking to service something that was 60 years old. It's amazing. And at the same time, there's people out there who are trying to understand, how many super sessions of parts have happened? Do we make it easy for them to find that? And then what about, even this disconnected aspect of, are these new superseded SKUs linked to new product? In other words, you create something and design something. What does it take to service it? Maybe that part has changed its life and number 10 times over. You'll see kind of on the right, it's helpful to think about, maybe this is a question to ask internally. Where is a SKU, a stock keeping unit, in other words, where is a SKU born? Who owns it? And I think if you ask around your organization, you'll probably have a lot of different answers, which actually proves the point that there's some ambiguity around where is the knowledge in my systems. Julie, I'll hand it over to you real quick.
Sure, you got it. So if you're not set up to operationally, or you're not set up operationally to run an efficient, high profit aftermarket program, but you're still trying to capture the value of aftermarket, because obviously you know that your customers need these parts. There's a full product journey, like Stephen was talking about, sometimes even 60 years running. Um, if you're trying to capture the value of that, your teams are likely doing a tremendous amount of manual work to support your customers through that full life cycle of the product and that full buying journey. So ways that you could be addressing this might be merchandising around upsells or that concept of next best part. So, when they're making that initial purchase, or even during some of your post-purchase interactions, you're trying to, suggest consumables or wear parts and different toolkits at that time. That's really valuable. It can be a lot of work if you're trying to figure that out manually on the go. You're probably trying to help customers figure out, Stephen mentioned serial numbers, right? That guidance around this works with your serial range. You're trying to reduce calls to the support center. You're trying to reduce returns. This is really important to give your customers this guidance. It can just be a tremendous amount of work when you're digging through papers and people's hard drives. You're likely trying to guide people through that journey of service, right? Maintenance reminders, different parts, and bundles tied to run times that you're aware of if you're tracking that. And then, of course, just helping customers diagnose the issue that they're experiencing so that they can find that correct replacement part or replacement kit. There's a lot of work that goes into this. And what all of this requires is product content, structured, accurate product content that supports the complete customer buying journey from the point in which they realize they need a replacement part all the way through to the point where they have it installed and their equipment is up and running again. So we're going to take a look at what that product content can all entail. Because sometimes it's things that you just might not think of. You have it, but you might not think, oh, this is something that a customer really needs to see, or this is something that really completes that full product story and that full buying journey. So I'm going to pass it to Stephen because he has touched probably all of these pieces of content in his role, and he's being humble. He ran an aftermarket program at the manufacturer that he worked for and was very highly engaged in making that incredibly profitable. So I'm going to let him speak to this.
Yeah, thanks, Julie. I'm going to tell a brief story here that I think fits this particular need. Um, Kind of get in a little bit later to disclose, which is pretty easy if anybody looks it up. But I worked at a forklift manufacturer, manufacturing, large ranges and assortments of products and supporting millions of different SKUs and variations. And, it's not uncommon for people who have equipment that a manufacturer, produces to all of a sudden run into some compliance needs, or maybe it's something around the advent of safety. And a lot of people like to market around maybe risk or the next things that are happening in that world, but a real need from a compliance and safety perspective was requirements from an OSHA standpoint. And in the world of material handling and forklifts, it was pretty common to see this trend and transition towards alarms and lights and safety and awareness things to mitigate or minimize some potential risk or awareness. Hey, here's big machinery. It's moving. I want you to know it's coming down the road or down the aisle of the warehouse. And sometimes what occurs is those compliance or other needs actually then stimulate or foster the need for all sorts of replacements. In other words, once lights were required on forklifts, and if you had one and it tested successfully, guess what? OSHA said, well, you actually have to have the same light on all pieces of equipment in your facility so that everything matches. And and I saw that kind of snowball effect occur with many, many different compliance and regulations, regulatory statutes put in place. There is a need there to say, well, the customer has, man, this broke, I need something. Or guess what? I need an accessory because compliance has come in. Or maybe I need something to make my operators or users or consumers who use my equipment more comfortable. So there's something that starts this journey. And then you start to say, well, will it fit? How do I know it fits? Is it the right? Will the same light that I used as an example actually fit everything? Is everything that I have within the entire fleet or entire operation all the same size? Is it the same serial range? And then you get to this journey of purchase, and there's all these moments of truth. And then I start to install and verify that. And does it, again, match everything and meet up? And then what about, even maintaining that? What about replacement of what I've just affixed and put on? And so there's all these moments, what we call maybe moments of truth or moments of operational, these are touch points along the way. Maybe it's a good idea to map these out. Do you know where those touch points are in your customer journey? And this is all undergirded by the need for good, solid product content, right? So where does the product content live then? We've got these blobs everywhere. You've probably been tired of hearing acronym and alphabet soup. You've got an ABC to an ERP to a PLM to a CMS to everything. But some of these probably resonate pretty strong. By the way, ABC, it might be a system, but I'm just using that for joke and jest. But all of you have probably experienced, and I went through my tenure at a industrial manufacturer where I saw a replacement and selected a CMS and selected, even was part of the journey for a new ERP and a PLM and going through CPQ phases and a new DAM. Many of these I've touched, used, been a part of in the buying cycle, the journey, and implementation. And I'll tell you what, these systems of old are so separated or built on needs that were very isolated. And so that data is oftentimes not connected. It is oftentimes very separated. And so even though these bubbles kind of touch to some degree, sorry, you can go ahead, Julie.
Oh, right. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. But sometimes they kind of touch and overlap, but they don't share everything in the fullest extent. Right. So where does that take us? How does a manufacturer ensure that customers can make an aftermarket purchase decision confidently? Right. All of those touch points from all of those systems, right? You need to be able to connect this in some way. How do you tell the full product story? In other words, you've designed and created something in a PLM. How do you ensure that all of that knowledge that's in there touches the other systems to manage that efficiently? How do you even publish the product data? Maybe it's really manual. I don't know if the team that's on the phone here reaches out to, do you reach out to product managers for some bits of it? And do you reach out to sales for other parts of it? And do you reach out to service and warranty for other parts? That can become a very cumbersome and time-consuming aspect. So the challenge here is to tell the full product story and efficiently publish product data, right? So let's talk a little bit about maybe a product data model, if we want to use that term, this kind of schema that might actually take bits and pieces from all the system. At the center of this, you see a product. I'm just using a grill as an example. And actually, funny story, when Julie and I were first talking about this a few months ago, I actually said, hey, I'm looking at buying a new grill. In this case, it was a pellet smoker. And I was thinking, well, what am I going to buy? And as we look at a product data, how these things are connected, this particular product at the center might be offered in different colors or item variants, which has its own unique attributes or things that define what it is. It might also have some related product that's maybe a little different or better. better for a particular need or better for a particular environment. And certainly there are some replacement parts and resources that, again, are defined by different means, different than the grill itself. There's, of course, product resources and brochures that define that, but maybe there's SDS or other technical data sheets that define it. Maybe it's regulatory or compliance related. And then what about service? How do you define that? How do you say, well, typically every 50 hours we do this or 100 hours, etc. And then you get into, well, who am I marketing to? What are the personas where I'm marketing this? Are you an enthusiast? Are you a professional? There's different ways to think about this. Are you not even the end consumer, but you're actually the dealer of the equipment? And all of those have slight variations in the persona and how we position. But then what about bundles? How do I even match all this up? And this is just, again, not even system based, but different things, different products where content needs to be owned and centralized from all these different areas. So that leads us to, how do we support this? How do we support the whole journey with product content? How do we bundle all of that up into not just a system, but a way of working to centralize everything? Right, think about it this way. You've got your hierarchies and relationships, you've got products and whole goods that you sell, but then there are related spare parts and related documents. What are the means and mechanisms to store those today? What about the compatibility and fitment? Man, what a struggle that is. But I've got some fun and interesting stories around that in particular. Maybe there's challenges with supersession. We touched on that earlier, but I'll tell you what, for the past 20 years, and especially through the COVID era, I saw part supersession happening all the time as supply chain and vendors changed. Essentially, everybody's saying they sell the same part, but you might have to change who you get it from, or maybe there's a new version of it, or maybe it's a new coating or some other derivative that leads to supersession. And that can be extremely difficult to manage without the right systems and processes in place. But then finally, how do you manage all of this from an attribute schema or perspective? Do you have light CPQ needs where you actually need to say, well, this spec and descriptive is regulatory, or maybe it's a merchandising item? And all of these make it difficult to essentially have and tell the same story through all of these disconnected systems. And then even at the very bottom, many of you in marketing might be facing this kind of document management and versioning of things, and even trying to get that central product data that tells your story out the door quick enough through efficiencies. Or you having to go, like we mentioned before, to the product team or to the service team or to the engineers or someone else to get bits and pieces of data, right? So this is certainly a challenge, but we have the need for a system that ties that together to accelerate your ability to do this effectively, efficiently, and in a governed, structured way. Okay, so this is kind of the secret sauce then, right? This is the way, this is the recipe to do that effectively. And this is how you can control all those streams of data to tell your digital product story in an effective means through and through. What you see here is kind of a light touch because it goes very deep, but at a high level, Inriver, that's the company that I work for now, and previously decided to deploy Inriver as a PIM. A PIM stands as an undergirding fundamental way to essentially tie all of those disconnected product content areas together. It allows you to bring in and onboard product data from your PLM or ERP or CMS or other downstream systems, perhaps, but then to start creating and enriching that within structured ways to manage that, to uphold your governance or compliance and taxonomy related needs. Allows you also to distribute then out, whether it is, again, to a CMS or an e-commerce or point of sale system, or maybe it's to another third-party retailer like an Amazon or a Grainger or some other marketplace or trading partner. But not only that, you have the ability to distribute to channels as well as even, and marketing folks love to hear that something like Inriver can connect directly to InDesign. So all of that enriched product data can go straight to your marketing templates and be able to automatically store and create all of that data without having to hunt and peck for it through all these other systems. And then lastly, once you sent data out, how do you know how it's performing? How do you check on it? And so Inriver gives you something called evaluate. It gives you the eyes and ears to see that once product data has left the system, you can then in turn see, well, what is it doing? Is it the right information that I sent? Did Amazon actually record that? Did Granger actually receive the right product image? Is this the full product story? And this gives you this continuous feedback so you can own your product, your digital product story through and through. I guess this is me, right? So I'd mentioned forklifts. I came from a company called Hyster Yale, where we manufactured the Hyster and Yale brands of forklifts. It's in the material handling industry, been a company for 100 plus years. And you can imagine product data lived everywhere. Literally, it did live in a microfiche or on a 2D, drawing pen and paper. Literally, there were stacks of manuals that oftentimes had not even been scanned in or converted to digital means. And yes, there was a lot of digitalization that was occurring, but it's hard to all of a sudden accelerate digitalization. You can do that forward thinking, but what about even all the data over the last 80 years? Maybe we've done it to the degree of the last 20 years. But the rapid change in today's environment for e-commerce and the go-to-market strategy digitally, it is tough for manufacturers to keep up. And I faced that directly at Hyster Yale. So we saw a critical need to consolidate data and effectively and efficiently manage that at scale. And River was chosen amongst many other PIM platforms because of the complexities that we faced as a manufacturer. You saw that schema example before where it was a grill and it had all these relationships. We had to take these complexities in different types of structures and relate them together in a single source of truth, a single pane of glass that allowed me to tie together replacement parts, to define what they were, to say the importance of servicing them, to be able to actually define and enrich them rather than this is just, I use this jokingly, but maybe this strikes a chord. Many of our systems truncated results. So when you see hose assembly, it was not at all uncommon for a dealer or our customers to see the actual term hose assy because we had to abbreviate assembly into a much smaller term. But no, a PIM and a different system actually enabled our ability to transform what that meant and to make it more meaningful. What this yielded and resulted in was rich data. It accelerated our ability to send that out to our North American dealer audience, which was well over 350 different in locations and branches. But then even beyond this part, started to extend that to our European, Middle East, and Africa, our EMEA theater, and start to connect data out to the rest of the world, which is Asia Pacific, and Japan as well. And so this was the undergirding platform that accelerated our ability to go to market and provide e-commerce as a real way to touch both B2B, our dealers, and B2B to see the end customer through a single pane of glass, through a single source.
Thank you for sharing that, Stephen. I
You're
love
welcome.
that story. And so where do you focus, right? You likely feel this struggle. You very likely know and understand the value of the aftermarket and the revenue potential that's there. So where do you start? Talk to your team, right? Identify where aftermarket friction is showing up for you today. Is it in high returns? Is it overloaded support call centers? Is it dealers being confused? Is it lost orders, meaning lack of conversion? And map one high value market after journey. Pick a product line, pick one equipment family or one region, and take inventory of all of the product content and product data that a customer needs to really be able to, to be supported through that full journey. So the fitment rules, the super sessions, all of the documentation, and you figure out who owns that content and that product data. And then internally, as you're talking to your team and you're reaching across the organization, align on what better actually looks like. Is it fewer errors in data? Is it customers being able to self-service faster? Is it higher conversion? Who doesn't want that, right? And up to this point, everything on this list is diagnosable, it's discoverable without any new tools. But the moment that you try to operationalize it, like Stephen was just talking about at Heister Yale, what they did, as soon as you try to operationalize it, this is where it's so common for organizations to just hit a wall. Fitment logic living in spreadsheets doesn't scale. Supersession rules living in people's heads, it doesn't scale. PDFs on shared drives, it doesn't scale. And if you want your customers to really be able to self-serve, be independent, if you want dealers to guide customers confidently, you want to help your internal teams stop having to always be putting out fires, the systems underneath have to support that reality. And this is where purpose-built platforms like PIM, they stop being a nice to have tool and they become core operational infrastructure. It really gives you that single source of truth, that single place to manage all data related to a whole good, related to all of its products. It gives you that product truth. It defines the rules and it allows you to manage all of that full product story. You can manage that efficiently over time as things change because they inevitably change, right? So as we wrap up today, just to bring it back to where we started, for most manufacturers, the initial sale is only the beginning. And the real opportunity lives in everything that happens after that sale. So, as we see manufacturers losing revenue over time in the aftermarket space, it's not because they don't want to buy from you. That revenue leaks because it's difficult for them to buy with confidence. And when customers can't find the right part, they can't confirm compatibility, they can't access the right information, they're just going to look somewhere else. They're going to buy it from someone else. And when you take control of the full story, manage it intentionally, the aftermarket can become an advantage instead of a risk. So customers can self-service more efficiently, support teams aren't putting out fires, loyalty grows over time, revenue grows over time, and that's really what it's all about. So thank you for your time today. We appreciate the opportunity to share what we're seeing. We hope this gives you some practical ideas that you can take back and discuss with your teams, discuss with your organization. And we're very happy to answer any questions that you have. If you guys have comments or things that you've seen that you want to share and talk about, you've got a little time left and happy to open it up to anyone that has any questions. All right. Quiet bunch. Well, I hope this was valuable for you today. I don't know if there's anything in the chat, Stephen. I can't see the chat, but I trust you would have mentioned.
That's right.
Hope this was valuable. If you think of anything that you want to talk about later, questions, feel free to reach out. Our contact information is right here. Always happy to chat and support you, even if it's just to bounce ideas off of and kind of dig into some of the experience that we've had to see if it resonates with what you're experiencing. Please feel free to do so. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Yes. And thank you, Julie and Steve, for sharing your expertise. I will send this video out to everyone who registered and let them know they can share it with their coworkers. And Otherwise, it'll be on YouTube as well. So thank you again for your time. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you so
Bye-bye.
much.
Enjoy the rest of your day.